Hello and welcome to Ask MotorInc. It's been an awesome week because I've been on a motorcycle every single day, not just commuting, also testing. And therefore, I'm really excited for this episode. Also, because the first question, it's a really good question. Now, the questions that we are taking on Ask MotorInc come from Circles, which is a small part of the free to download MotorInc app, where you can post a question by using the hashtag AskMotoring. You can post pictures. We're constantly responding to questions there. Some of the interesting ones we bring up here on this video. So that's where you'd actually ask a question. That's where you'd actually get an answer, and not just from us, from the rest of Motoring fam. Now, let's get straight to the first question, which is from a user called Siddhesh, and he wants to know, please explain be 10% faster than traffic. This is a superb way to ride in traffic. I first heard of it because this is part of the British police officer or road officer or traffic police, something like that, their user manual for motorcycle police. And the idea is that whenever you're going in traffic, to be safer, you want to always be in a position of control. And to be in a position of control, you have to be overtaking things. You can overdo it. So if you're overtaking everything and you're riding 50% faster than traffic, then things are coming at you so quickly that you may not be able to process it. There are variables in there. It could be road surfaces, it could be chaotic traffic, etc. And you're putting yourself at risk. And therefore, they figured out how much slower do you go where you continue to overtake stuff. You are very well aware of what's going on and you remain in control. And the logic seems to be about 10%. The flip side of that, and you should consider the flip side, is if you get overtaken by traffic a lot, what that means is you can only say, I'm going to be here in this lane, in this position, at this speed, and I'm not going to do anything surprising so that they can make the decision to go around me peacefully. But that basically means you've surrendered control of that situation for every practical purpose to that person, whoever they are, in whatever vehicle they're driving. This is why, if you're out on the highway a lot, generally I would tell you, if you can afford a 150, but you're on the highway a lot, please stretch and get to ideally a 250. If you have a 250, please try and stretch and get to a 400. And the reason why we say this for highway is motorcycles are vulnerable and you want to have the performance at hand so that you can stay in the overtaking position. And while you're in the city, everything is going at 40, 50 kilometers an hour. It's not hard to do. Out on the highway, everybody's going 80, 90, and then you do need the performance to make overtakes happen quickly. So the primary reason to say 10% faster than traffic, where you can be in a position of control and you can choose what happens next as much of the time as possible. It's a safety thing. Happens to make you a little bit quicker, etc., is not important. This is the safe way to do it. The next question is also a good one, and it's from Pramit, who is asking, are radiator guards necessary for motorcycles? Most manufacturers put the stock radiator guards through a pretty extensive validation process. And the bigger the brand is, the more you can trust that they've done their due diligence. So if it was a Honda, a Suzuki, Bajaj, TVS, Yamaha, I wouldn't really worry about their radiator guards too much unless the radiator itself was very expensive. And to me, this is how you solve this. So if you're buying a big machine, say 10 lakh rupees and above, that radiator is probably part of an imported machine, which means if you put a hole in it somehow, then you'll have to import a replacement. That will not be covered under warranty. That looks expensive. We'll put a radiator guard. But if you're buying an Indian made motorcycle, which is reasonably non expensive, 2.5, 3, 4 lakh rupees, then the radiator by itself can't be too expensive. And in that situation, I would trust the radiator guard. Now, therefore, I would not be adding metal radiator guards to my machines as much as possible. The solution that I found is if you look on Amazon, you will find a mesh which is called a gutter guard, GUTTR gutter guard. The gutter guard was originally designed to cover the rain gutters on sloping roofs so that leaves wouldn't fall into it and block the gutter. It's a pretty wide spaced mesh, and that mesh usually is not made of thermoplastic, which means the plastic doesn't melt or deform when it is exposed to heat. If you're really going to worry about your radiator guard, the lightweight and cost effective solution is to buy a roll of gutter guard. If you buy one roll of gutter guard, I don't know, 15 or 20 of your friends could make radiator guards out of it. Cut it out into the appropriately sized shape, zip tie it onto the front of the radiator guard so that it's facing outwards, and that should usually be enough to prevent large stones that are being kicked up by a wheel from going into a radiator, and that's it. But to me, 99% of the time, unless you're actively going off-road a lot where there is a chance you'll be in really loose gravel for lots of time and kicking all of this into the radiator, honestly, you don't need to worry about it. Next, it's like this is a great episode. This is 00. And their question is, how do you figure out what to expect from a chassis? What are the factors on which a chassis is judged? And how do you understand the ways to take advantage of a particular kind of chassis? And honestly, there is no short answer to this question. To answer the first one, how do you figure out what to expect from a chassis? For many of us, it's just a matter of more motorcycles and more time. The more machines you experience, the more time you spend experiencing them, the more you get a sense of, oh, that bike does it like this, and this bike does it like that. And the next step beyond that, I like what this one is doing a lot more than how that one does it. And then you start finding preferences. And this to me is how you say, I like how adventure tourers go into corners versus I like how sports bikes go into corners. They don't feel the same. People have subjective preferences, and neither of them are saying something fundamentally wrong. If you want on road performance into a corner, there is no doubt that the sports bike is the sharpest tool you can buy. If you want the most general purpose sharp tool, then you'll have to get an ADV. And if you want a off road sharp tool, then you'll have to get a motocross or a dirt bike. But how you make the assessment that this is a good thing and that's a bad thing, in many cases it's a matter of experience. And once the experience starts to accumulate, then it's the idea saying, what did I do that caused this behavior which I don't like to happen, versus what did the chassis do which caused the bad behavior that I'm not enjoying so much, and being able to separate the two, which is what I do as a road tester. My job is to go experience a motorcycle and say, huh, it does that, but did I make the motorcycle do that, or was the motorcycle going to do it anyway? And therefore, it's actually an engineering or a design or a chassis choice issue. There's no real short way to answer this, but the more motorcycles you ride, the more you pay attention to what you're riding. And if you ride a variety of motorcycles over a long time, these feelings will become very clear. If you're a group of friends, a very powerful way to do this is keep swapping bikes. And I'm not saying ride them hard. I'm just saying experience how you would normally ride a machine. So you remove the riding skill variable from it and experience what the machine does. And you start to pick up on subtle differences. That database will tell you how it works. The fundamental basis of how a chassis is judged, though, is always predictability. Does the chassis do what you think it should when you do it? If your skill level is behind, the chassis can be scary, but it's a good chassis on its own. If it's in consonance with you, which means I have a certain skill level, the chassis talks to that skill level, it does exactly that, then that's a chassis that is really working for you today. And you might want to ask the question, tomorrow, if I become more skilled, will it continue to work for me? And that is a little bit of a subjective game. How serious a rider are you? It gets complicated there. But to me, the basic idea is the more you ride, the more kinds of bikes you ride, the more this will become clear to you. Throttle in tune, and another great question is, if you have multiple motorcycles, how do you pick which motorcycle you're riding today? Do you choose while you're picking up the key upstairs, or when you come down to the garage and you see the bikes and you say, okay, which one should I ride? And honestly, I don't really have a clear method of doing this. I'm lucky. I have access to usually about 5, 6, 8 machines, out of which 2 may be mine, and the rest will be from work. And if they are from work, they will usually have an agenda for them already. So I'll already know that tomorrow I have to go ride whatever it is. But let's assume that I have only my motorcycles, which today is a Adventure and a Duke. I honestly can't decide. Most of the time, my jacket contains both the keys, and I can walk up to the bike. And as I'm thinking about my day today and the to do list, etc., I can get to the bikes and say, okay, I'll take the Duke or I'll take the Adventure. But it's not a big deal. But I do want to know how you guys approach this. So if you have multiple machines in your garages, how do you choose what you're going to ride today? Leaving aside the consideration of that's too big, I'm going to take that on the weekend, leaving that out because that is an obvious one. How else would you decide, especially if you have machines that would say, for example, both commute easily or both go down the highway easily or both go off-road easily? In that event, how do you decide? I would love to know what you think. Pawan Emekar asks, why do bike manufacturers not provide strong enough headlights these days? Usually the answer to that is always cost cutting. And that basically means that when we shifted from halogen or other kinds of headlights to LEDs, more or less whole and soul now, manufacturers had to choose how to do headlights. And if you look carefully in the motorcycle headlight world, you have basically two kinds of LED headlights coming out today. One of them is a reflector headlight, the other one is a projector headlight. The reflector headlight basically builds the back of the LED units out so that they can control where the light falls. And projector units put a lens in front of the LED unit so they can control how the light falls. In my experience so far, most of the projector LED setups completely outperform the reflector setups. But that is also how the cost works. Reflector setups are usually less expensive. You should also look up how LED chips are manufactured. There are some very surprising things in there that will shock you a little bit. And in some, what it means is the most high quality LED and the really worst quality, no guarantees available LED are all manufactured together in a row. Once they are manufactured, quality assessments are done. It's called binning. And then from the lowest grade bin to the topmost grade bin is where manufacturers will go in and purchase the LEDs they did actually like to use. And sometimes manufacturers who are super cost conscious will end up erring towards the side of the less good LEDs, and therefore it just doesn't have enough light output. Or it has some light output, but if you make it strong enough, then it starts to fail earlier. So then you'd start trying to control the output by lowering the amount of light it gets, it makes, and then suddenly it's not such a great headlight anymore. Luckily for us, we do have very good auxiliary lights on the markets today. The laws about them are actually pretty clear, and the law is cannot be mounted above the headlight. That's illegal. Cannot be exposed, as in you can't see the auxiliary light's lens during the day. It must be covered. This is pretty clear. And this is an old law. I don't know how they would implement it today, but it's supposed to be half the wattage of the headlight is the clear law for auxiliary lamps. If you do meet these three criteria, you can have auxiliary lamps and solve this. But honestly, we deserve better headlights. And in the same breath, it's not like you can't make good LED headlights. If you look at the headlight of the current generation KTM 390 Adventure, that's a great headlight. I don't really like the Dominar as a motorcycle, but it's always actually had a pretty powerful headlight. Most of the TVS headlights today, and the RTR 310 is a fantastic example. It has this weird brightness thing that happens, but at the full brightness, that is a really, really, really good LED headlight too. So it's not like it cannot be done, but it looks like the cost considerations of making motorcycles, that seems to get in the way. And the last question is something that I've been researching in the recent past, and I have fresh answers. It's from Suresh Arvind, and they want to know, can we use adventure boots for off road, or should you choose motocross boots instead? And the answer to this is motocross boots. Okay, two things that you want to know about boots before you start on this specific question. First of them would be motorcycle boots are kind of hard to buy in India right now, especially the imported ones, because India is transitioning from you can sell boots if they are certified for use in India. That means an ISI mark and the process of that. This has been going on for a couple of years, I think, and they want to make sure all footwear on sale in India is tested to Indian standards and all of that. This is causing a bit of a hiccup right now. And to me, this is exactly how the CE laws were implemented in Europe as well. And in some ways, they do standardize things. In other ways, they're also a little bit of a protectionist move where other brands from other countries can't come to your country that easily and therefore destroy local businesses. I see both sides of it. In the moment, though, it's inconvenient. Now, when you go off road, the amazing thing about this is if you have a street helmet, you can start off-roading with the street helmet. You will see an upgrade when you get a more off-road appropriate helmet. If you have street gear, you can use street gear off-road. When you get to proper designed for it off-road gear, you'll see a comfort, a mobility, etc. upgrade from it. This is also true for pants. This is also true for inner layers. But every single person who has gone off road or is serious about off road will tell you that this adventure boot thing is a little bit of marketing BS. This is because they're designed to look like an off road product, like a motocross boot, but the amount of protection that they give you can often be significantly less. Where sometimes I'm saying adventure boots can protect you less than the average street boot in some very specific cases. They do look like that. So you have a sense of, oh, robust, big built boot, but it doesn't actually do any of those things, which does have a good side to it. When a boot looks that kind of bulky but doesn't have too much protection, it can also turn out quite comfortable. So if you take the former Adventure, which has been a very popular boot all over the world, it doesn't have a lot of protection. I've crashed in that boot and it did save my foot, and it was not an off-road crash, but it was a pretty gnarly crash because I got hit by a car. It basically hit my handlebar. I got turned in towards the footpath, and when I landed, the Ducati Multistrada landed on my foot. My foot got caught between the bike and the footpath, and I got dragged along for a bit. And not a lot of damage on my foot. The boot did work, but it does not have a lot of protection versus a motocross boot. And the reason why you want a motocross boot is while you're figuring out how off road works, there are small things which can cause serious injuries, like a twisting of the foot, like you're dropping your bike on your foot, getting trapped under the motorcycle, and all of these things, for which a motocross boot offers a lot more protection. The flip side of all of that protection is motocross boots are really hard to walk around in. The initial break-in period, as it's called, can be difficult because it feels like you're wearing a plaster cast. The soles of motocross boots are designed not to flex. There's a steel bar in there. So the boot doesn't actually do this. It stays flat. So when you're standing using a motocross boot on an adventure tourer, it actually feels more comfortable and more sustainable. But when you try to walk on it, because your foot wants to flex, but the boot does not, it can be kind of difficult. So there are a little bit of issues, pros and cons on both sides. But to me, fundamentally, it is pretty clear. If you're learning to go off-road, you're exposing yourself to risk. The risk is least controlled in terms of street gear at your feet. And to me, the only piece of equipment that you absolutely must have if you're planning to go off-road is a proper motocross style boot that gives you a lot of protection. How do you know it gets a lot of protection? At the most crass thumb rule level, if you have difficulty walking in that boot, it's probably trying to protect you. And the difficulty in movement is coming from the fact that it won't let your foot move as easily as it's used to in sneakers, on chappals, or Crocs, or whatever. And therefore, net net, if you're going to start going off-road, think about your protection as boot first. The boot is the most critical element. Whatever other gear you have will probably work until you can upgrade to something more appropriate, but the boot is the thing. Thank you so much for watching. If you're wondering where we're getting these questions from, it's a section called Circles. It's a part of the MotorInc app. There's a huge community that is out there asking questions, telling their stories, telling us where they've been, where they're going, what are they planning to do. And in there are little hashtags called Ask MotorInc that tells us there's a question in there that they'd like answered. Usually MotorInc fam, that's this community, they jump in and answer those questions before us. But sometimes we are just on their tiptoes giving our updates on how we think this particular problem should be approached. And when the questions become really interesting, they come up here on this video episode. See you on the next one.